The mop was yellow. I remember that detail clearly even now. A yellow plastic handle, a worn gray head that smelled like pine cleaner and old water. My mother had pulled it from the closet under the stairs and was holding it out to me the way you hand a tool to a plumber you hired, not to a daughter you raised. It was Thanksgiving morning. The turkey had been in the oven since 7. The kitchen smelled of butter and rosemary and the particular kind of grease that comes from basting every 45 minutes. A football game mumbled from the living room television. I could hear my brother's voices rise and fall over a play I couldn't see from where I was standing at the kitchen counter, where I had been standing, without sitting down, since 9 in the morning. My name is Amelia. I was 27 years old that Thursday in November, and I had driven 3.5 hours from Indianapolis back to the house I grew up in, because my mother had said, "Come home for Thanksgiving. It would mean a lot to your father." And so I came. I always came. I had peeled 8 pounds of potatoes. I had made 2 pies from scratch. I had washed the good dishes by hand because my mother didn't trust the dishwasher with them. I had wiped down the counters, set the dining room table, polished the serving spoons, and arranged the centerpiece of dried corn and gourds that my mother had bought at the market and left in a grocery bag on the counter with the silent assumption that I would handle it. My brothers had arrived at noon. Derek brought a 12-pack of beer, and Cole brought a store-bought pie that he set on the counter with the confidence of a man who believes he has contributed something. They shook my father's hand. They found their spots on the couch. The game was on. I was 30 feet away in the kitchen when my mother walked in, looked at the linoleum floor, and said we needed to mop before the guests arrived. My aunt and uncle were coming at 2. It was 1:15. I said, "Can Derek or Cole do it? I've been cooking since 9. My mother looked at me the way you look at someone who has said something confusing, something that doesn't quite parse. Then she opened the closet under the stairs. She pulled out the yellow mop. She held it out to me and said, simply and with complete calm, "No work, no food." 4 words, no work, no food. I stood there with that mop handle in both hands, and I felt something shift inside me. Not crack, not break, shift, like a plate of earth moving under tremendous, quiet pressure. I had been in that kitchen since 9 in the morning, and I had not eaten breakfast, and I had not sat down, and now I was holding a mop, and the men in the living room had not been asked to do a single thing. I want to tell you what happened next. I want to tell you what I did when I set that mop down. Because I did set it down. And then I picked up my coat. And I walked out of that house. And I did not go back. If you've ever stood in a kitchen that never felt like yours, if you've ever worked for love that never paid out at the rate you were charged, stay with me. I'm going to tell you the whole story. And if this is hitting somewhere real for you, go ahead and like this video while you listen. Subscribe if you want to hear more. This story is far from over. To understand what happened at Thanksgiving, you have to go back. Not to some dramatic moment, not to a single wound I could point to cleanly and say this is where it started. The pattern was older than any one memory. It was built into the house the way the floors were built in, laid down before I arrived and never questioned after. I grew up in a town of about 11,000 people in rural Indiana, a place where the fields go flat to the horizon and the sky in November goes the color of pewter. My father, Warren, worked at an AutoZone distribution center, shift supervisor. My mother, Diane, worked part-time at a dental office answering phones. My brothers were Derek, 5 years older than me, and Cole, 3 years older. And then there was me. I have been trying for years to find the moment when I first understood the arrangement, and the earliest I can get is this. I am 9 years old, and it is my birthday. My mother has invited 4 of my friends over for a small party. There are streamers in the dining room. There is a cake, chocolate, which I asked for. I should be happy. I remember being happy for about 20 minutes. And then my mother came to me in the kitchen and said the vacuum needed to be run before the guests arrived because the carpet looked like something had happened to it. I vacuumed the living room carpet while my brother Derek played his video game system in his bedroom with the door closed, the sound effects muffled through the wall. It took me 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, the way a child watches a clock when they want something to be over. Then I rolled the cord back up and put the vacuum away, and rejoined my friends who had been waiting near the table for me, a little unsure of what was happening. Nobody said thank you. Nobody acknowledged that I had done it. My mother simply nodded when she saw the carpet and moved into the next thing she needed to move into. I carried a plate of chips to the table and told my friends we could start. That was the house. That was the air in it. The boys existed. I contributed. The boys were present, and that was enough. I was expected to be useful, and useful meant labor, and labor was the price of belonging. I did not understand this as a child. I did not have words for it. I only knew that I was tired in ways that the other girls at school did not seem to be tired, and that when I came home, I was already calculating what needed to be done before I could sit down. My father was not cruel. I want to be fair about this. Warren was not a villain who twisted his mustache and assigned me extra chores out of malice. He was a man who had grown up in a house just like ours, where women worked and men rested, and had never once been given reason to examine that assumption. He was pleasant when everything functioned. He was quiet when it didn't. He said, "Good girl," sometimes when I set dinner on the table. That was the economy of affection in our house. My mother was more complicated. Diane was smart and had wanted more for herself once. She had a shelf of novels she'd read in her 20s that she never talked about. And she knew how to use a level and hang her own drywall if she needed to, which meant she had been capable of more than she'd been allowed. But she had bent herself to fit the shape of that house a long time before I came along, and she had a way of passing the pressure down to me, the same way you hand something heavy to someone smaller. Not with cruelty, but with the quiet assumption that they will receive it. Derek and Cole were simply themselves. They were my brothers. They watched football and argued about teams and borrowed my father's truck on weekends and came home for holidays and ate everything on the table and left the kitchen the way men leave kitchens in houses where women have agreed, generation by generation, to absorb the cost. This was the pattern, and I grew up inside it the way you grow up inside weather. You don't name it, you just get wet. I found the thing I was good at when I was 14. It started as restlessness. My bedroom felt wrong to me in a way I couldn't explain. And one Saturday afternoon, when my mother was at work and my father was in the garage and my brothers were long gone into their own lives, I moved all the furniture. I pushed my desk to face the window instead of the wall. I moved my bed diagonal instead of flush against the headboard. I took the curtains down and let the light come in at an angle that hit the old pine floor in a stripe. Then I stood in the doorway and looked at what I had done. It felt like a sentence I had been trying to say for years had finally come out right. I started sketching rooms on graph paper. I borrowed design books from the library and read them in my bedroom with the door closed. I looked at the rooms I knew, our kitchen, the school gymnasium, the waiting room at the doctor's office, and I thought about what was working and what was wrong and what I would do differently if someone gave me the authority to do anything at all. I told my parents about this when I was 15. I waited for a moment that felt right. My father was eating dinner, relaxed, football season not yet started. I said I wanted to study interior design. I had looked into programs. I said the word architecture, which I then walked back because I didn't want to oversell and lose the room. My father said, "People actually make money doing that?" My mother said, "What do interior designers even do? Isn't that just picking out curtains?" I explained carefully that it was more than that. Space planning, commercial and residential projects, environmental psychology. My mother looked politely interested, the way people look when they are waiting for you to finish so they can move on. My father returned to his food. Derek, who was at the table, said, "Good luck," which he meant neither kindly nor unkindly. He simply meant that it sounded like something that would not pan out. They were not angry. They did not forbid it. They just did not believe in it, and in that house, indifference from authority figures was its own kind of veto. I kept going anyway. I took every art and drafting class my high school offered. I entered a regional design competition when I was 17 and placed second. There was a ceremony at the county library on a Tuesday evening in April. A woman in a blazer shook my hand and handed me a certificate and a $50 gift card. The photograph in the local paper showed me standing alone, holding the certificate, smiling at someone off to the left of the lens who was not there. My parents had not been able to make it. My mother had a dentist appointment that rescheduled to that evening. My father had an early shift the next morning. Both of these things were true. They were also, it seemed to me, sitting in that folding chair. Not true in the way that mattered most. I put the certificate in my desk drawer. I used the $50 on graph paper and a set of drafting pencils. I kept building the world inside my head, room by room, knowing that I would have to leave this house before anyone in it would see what I was constructing. I got into a state university program in Indianapolis. Full application, scholarship covered about half. I worked through high school and had saved more than anyone in my family knew about. I remember telling my parents the date I was leaving for orientation, and my mother's response was not, "Congratulations," and it was not, "We'll miss you." It was, "Who's going to help around here?" That sentence, I have turned it over so many times in the years since. Who is going to help around here? As though the house required a specific kind of person to function, and that person was me, and my absence would leave a gap shaped exactly like my body. I went anyway. The first semester in Indianapolis was, genuinely, the best season of my life up to that point. I lived in a small dorm room that I made as intentional as I could with what I had, a specific arrangement of the 2 pieces of furniture I was allowed to bring, a lamp I bought at a thrift store that gave off a warm amber instead of the institutional overhead fluorescent. I made friends who were interested in the same things I was. I sat in studio and drew floor plans for buildings I would never build, and my professors marked them up and handed them back, and the marks meant something other than disappointment. I did not vacuum before anyone arrived. I did not mop anything. I cooked scrambled eggs in the communal kitchen at whatever hour I wanted and ate them standing over the sink with a novel open on the counter, and it was the freest I had ever felt in my life over a meal of scrambled eggs. But the phone calls started by October. "Your room at home is dusty. You should have cleaned it before you left. Derek needs whatever Derek needed that week. Your father's birthday is coming up. Have you thought about what you're doing? Cole's girlfriend is having trouble, and they need some space, so he's going to be at the house for a few weeks. Can you come home this weekend to help your mother out?" I started with yes. I said yes for the first year and a half because the guilt of no was heavier than the cost of yes. I drove home on long weekends. I cooked. I cleaned. I sat at the dinner table, listening to conversations about people I had gone to high school with and places I no longer connected to. And then on Sunday afternoon, I drove back in time to do homework and feel the week begin again. I graduated in 3.5 years. I was 22, and I had a degree and a portfolio and an offer from a small residential design firm in Indianapolis. I was 22, and I should have been launched. Instead, there was a phone call, and then another, and then a kind of gravitational certainty about what had to happen next. I could not yet afford the deposit on an apartment. I could not yet absorb the full cost of being entirely on my own. I would go home for 3 months and save up, and then I would leave properly. 3 months became 6. 6 became a year. A year became 18 months. My parents were not wrong that I was easier to have around than not. I was handy. I understood how to fix things. I could patch drywall, which I had learned from watching YouTube videos in my dorm room at 11 at night. I could rewire a lamp. I could build flat-pack furniture without reading the directions. These skills, in my family, did not read as impressive. They read as available. The design job kept me. I drove into the city 3 days a week and worked in a small studio with 2 senior designers and a project manager who was sharp and exacting and taught me more in 14 months than the university had in 3.5 years. I was learning. I was good at what I was learning, but I was doing it while also coming home to a house where my labor was assumed and my profession was still quietly considered a temporary hobby that hadn't quite broken yet. My father started expecting me to contribute financially. Not a formal conversation about rent, just a kind of increased visibility around the cost of things. Gas isn't cheap. The hot water heater is going to need replacing sometime. You're making money now. And so I started paying $150 a month, which became $200. And was on its way to $250 before I started pushing back in the only way I knew how, by adding up what I would need to leave and working toward it with a focused, quiet desperation. My brothers. Derek had moved out at 21, lived 40 minutes away, came to dinner on Sundays, and was celebrated for showing up. Cole had moved out at 22, come back, moved out again, come back again. Each time he moved back, it was called going through a hard time, and each time I was there, it was called living at home. The distinction was never spoken, but it ran under everything, like the hum of bad wiring. I want to be precise. No one was cruel to me constantly. There were good evenings. My mother could be funny. A dry, observational humor about the neighbors and local politics that I genuinely enjoyed. My father and I had a shared taste for old action movies, and sometimes we watched them together on Friday nights, and he would explain plot points he thought I had missed, and I let him, because it was not unkind, it was just how he loved, and I knew it was love, even when it looked like something else. But the pattern held, and by the fall of my second year back, I was ready to leave. I had the savings. I had scouted an apartment, I told them in October. My father said nothing for a long moment and then said, "You know what you're doing?" My mother said, "Who will help around here?" It was the second time she had said that sentence to me. Verbatim. 3 years apart, Cole said over the phone 2 days later, "You're abandoning the family. You know that's how it's going to look." I said, "I'm moving into an apartment, Cole. That's what people do." He didn't have an answer for that, but the temperature in the house dropped anyway. And then the Thanksgiving invitation arrived, like an olive branch after a frost. "Come home," my mother said. "I'll make your favorite." She was going to make the sweet potato casserole with the pecans on top that I had loved since I was small. I told myself this was a sign that they understood. I told myself maybe the conversation had landed. I told myself maybe this dinner was the beginning of something different. I drove 3.5 hours on a Wednesday afternoon. I should have known. I should have known from the first Wednesday when I arrived and there was already a list on the counter. December came and I made a decision that I think surprised even me. I stopped explaining myself, not in an angry way, not as a demonstration, just I stopped producing the justifications people seemed to be waiting for, the accounting of my feelings that would give everyone else the data they needed to adjudicate whether what I had done was fair. Because I had noticed something. No one in my family was asking whether what had been done to me was fair. They were asking for an accounting of my exit. The content of the kitchen, the mop, the 27 years of being the household's primary hinge, none of that seemed to be under review. I was available for conversations about how I was doing and where I was going. I was not available to discuss whether I owed anyone an apology for leaving a house where I had been told I could not eat without working first. The design job continued. My supervisor, a woman in her 40s named Pritha, who had built her firm from literally nothing and had a habit of removing her glasses and setting them on her forehead when she was thinking hard about a problem, started giving me more client-facing work that fall. Small projects at first. A starter home for a young couple. A renovation consult for a woman in Carmel who was turning a spare room into a home office. But Pritha trusted my eye and my pencil, and my ability to read what a client was describing, even when they didn't have the vocabulary to describe it clearly, which is maybe the most useful skill in residential design and one of the hardest to teach. I took the extra work home. I spent evenings at my kitchen table with floor plans and fabric swatches and paint chips, and the apartment slowly filled with the working artifacts of someone who was fully occupied with the thing they were meant to be doing. It looked like the room of a person engaged in their life. I started making the apartment into something. I hung a curtain that diffused the morning light into something soft. I found a secondhand console table and refinished it in a deep slate. I arranged the furniture to make the most of the ceiling height in the living room, pushing the couch back and floating a rug in the center to define the space. I went to the farmer's market on Saturday morning and bought a plant and put it in the window. I cooked things I had always wanted to try: a Moroccan-style stew with preserved lemon, a roasted cauliflower dish with tahini and herbs, a shakshuka I ate straight from the pan on a Sunday morning reading a novel on my phone. These were small things, I know that. But I want to say that small things were not small then. After years of doing labor that was expected and unremarked and constant, every act of choice, what I cooked, how I arranged my furniture, when I sat down and when I didn't, felt like a form of language. I was writing sentences in a room that was entirely mine. It was honestly one of the stranger and quieter pleasures of my life. In January, I picked up 2 freelance clients on my own. A referral from a friend of a friend, a couple who needed help with a condo redesign, and a woman I'll call Sandra who was starting a boutique skincare brand and needed a retail space designed from scratch. The Sandra project took about 2 months and came in under budget because I knew which vendors to call and how to read a structural plan. Sandra was delighted and told everyone she knew. By February, I was making more on the side than I was making at my regular job, which was not yet well-paying enough to reflect what I was doing in it. I did not call my parents to tell them any of this. I knew if I called, they would be pleasant in the way they were pleasant when things were functioning, and the subtext would be absent because there would be nothing in the conversation that challenged anyone's assumptions. And I was not ready for that conversation yet. The absence I had created felt necessary in a way I could not yet fully explain, like a room airing out after something had been sealed closed too long. I wrote in my notebook, "I am building something that belongs to me. I don't know yet how large it gets." 8 months after Thanksgiving, my mother called on a Saturday morning when I was at the farmer's market. I saw her name on my phone while I was looking at bundles of dried herbs, and I almost let it go to voicemail. I had let the last 6 calls go to voicemail. But something in me, some shift that had happened in 8 months of building my own life, made me pick up. She said, "Hi, sweetheart." I said, "Hi, Mom." She said she was in Indianapolis, which surprised me. She said she had come to see a friend from her dental office days who had moved here a few years back, and she was wondering if I might have an hour for coffee. She said it carefully, the way people speak when they are aware they might be turned away, and are trying to give you a graceful exit if you need one. I said, I had an hour. We met at a coffee place near my apartment that had good light and dark wood and uncomfortable chairs that I liked anyway, because the coffee was excellent. My mother looked smaller than I expected. Not physically smaller. She is about my height and has the same brown hair, mine a little darker, hers now with gray threading through it that she used to color but had apparently stopped. She looked smaller the way people look when you've been carrying an idea of them in your head for months, and then the actual person arrives and is just a person. She wrapped both hands around her mug. She looked at the table for a moment. Then she said, I want to tell you something, and I don't want you to feel like I'm asking for anything when I say it. I said, okay. She said, I knew it wasn't fair. I've known for a long time. What we asked of you, what I asked of you. It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't equal, and I knew that while it was happening, and I didn't change it. She said it plainly. She didn't dress it up. She did not say, I'm sorry if you felt, or I don't know what came over me. She said, I knew it wasn't fair, and I didn't change it. I looked at her. I held my mug. The coffee was very good. A single origin pour-over, the kind that has a brightness to it, like fruit. I said, why are you telling me this? She said, because you deserve to hear it, and because you were right to leave. I let that sit for a while. The coffee shop moved around us. Other conversations, someone at the counter ordering something complicated, a child saying something to their parent. The ordinary ambient life of a place where nothing significant was supposed to be happening. I said, does Dad know you're saying this? She said, no. I said, are you scared of him? And she looked at the table again, a long pause, and then said, not scared, but it took a long time for me to make room for my own opinion. That sentence hit me in a way I had not expected. Not scared, but it took a long time to make room for my own opinion. I heard inside it the whole length of her life in that house, the shelf of novels she never talked about, the drywall she could hang alone if she needed to, the woman who had bent to fit a shape not her own, so completely that she had forgotten she had a shape. I felt something complicated move through me. Not forgiveness exactly, not anger, the grief of it, maybe, of loving someone who failed you, and who knew they were failing you, and who was afraid in a way that translated down to you, like pressure, like weather, like a house that asked you to work before it let you eat. I did not hug her. I was not there yet. But I picked up my coffee and I said, thank you for telling me. She nodded. She had tears in her eyes that she did not let fall, which I recognized as a family trait. We sat there for an hour and talked about small things, the city, her friend, a television show she had been watching. And when we left, I said, we can do this again sometime. And she said, I like that. I walked home alone through a cool spring morning and felt something I couldn't immediately name. It came to me later when I was back in my apartment making lunch. It felt like the beginning of grief. The particular grief of something that might have been different. I did not go back to the family system. I want to be clear about that. The Thanksgiving table that I had left was still set the same way, and the air in that house still ran the same current, and my brothers still existed in it, the way they always had. My father called once, in February, and spoke in the register of a man who was waiting for something, and when I did not supply what he was waiting for, the call ended politely, and he did not call again for a long time. But I allowed, carefully, a different relationship with my mother to begin forming. I set the terms because I'd learned enough by now to understand that unilateral goodwill without structure just replicates old patterns. I said, monthly coffee when she's in the city or I drive out. No conversation about my brothers or what I owe the family. No guilt, no pressure. just us. She agreed. Not easily. I could tell she found the terms uncomfortable, the explicit stating of them. But she agreed. And we began again, slowly, the way you start a fire in wet weather. Carefully, with patience, coaxing something that might not catch. Meanwhile, Sandra had told her business partner about my work, and the business partner had a gallery she was opening in the Fountain Square neighborhood that needed a designer. I took the meeting in March. The gallery owner was a tall woman named Petra, who spoke the way architects speak, in planes and volumes, light and shadow, the conversation the space has with whoever enters it. We talked for 2 hours. She hired me on a handshake. The gallery project was the most complex thing I had done on my own. It ran 4 months, from schematic design through installation. I was on site 3 days a week, managing vendors, problem-solving around load-bearing walls and lighting systems, and a floor that turned out to have a quirk the original drawings hadn't shown. I slept less that spring than I had in years, and I didn't mind at all. The gallery opened in June. Petra invited me to the opening. I stood in the room I had helped make. The white walls, the track lighting angled just so. The wide plank floor refinished in a tone that read differently in natural and artificial light, and watched people move through the space and respond to it, their bodies shifting, their voices dropping to a murmur, the way they do when a room has weight. And I thought, I made this room. I made this room the way I made the room in my apartment when I was 14, pushing the desk toward the window, feeling the sentence come out right. I thought about the kitchen in my parents' house, the worn linoleum, the fluorescent light that made everyone look tired. I thought about the mop with its yellow handle. I thought, look what I built when I put it down. The gallery got written up in a city arts blog in July. A short piece, 3 paragraphs, with 2 photographs, both taken by a photographer Petra knew, both beautiful, the light in them doing exactly what I had designed it to do. The writer mentioned my name. She called me the designer behind Petra's space. She said the room had deliberate warmth, a precision that doesn't announce itself. Deliberate warmth. I kept that. 3 people contacted me after the piece ran. A restaurateur who was opening a second location, a tech company looking to redesign their offices, and a real estate developer who had been quietly acquiring old commercial buildings in the Near East Side and wanted to convert one into a boutique hotel. 12 rooms, a small bar, a lobby designed around a specific vision she had been carrying for years and hadn't found anyone she trusted to help her realize. Her name was Diane, same as my mother, which I noticed and said nothing about. I took all 3 meetings. I landed all 3. By the August after Thanksgiving, a year after I had stood in a kitchen holding a yellow-handled mop being told I could not eat without earning it, I had a registered LLC, a business bank account, a waiting list of 3 clients, and a 1-woman office in a shared co-working space in Fountain Square, where I had a desk by a window and a whiteboard covered in floor plans and color palettes. I had traded the junior position at Preetha's firm for a part-time consulting arrangement that kept us both intact. Preetha typically said, "Smart move," and went back to looking at load calculations. I also, around this time, made a decision about the mop in my kitchen closet. I had kept it there out of a mix of practicality and something less articulable, some private joke between me and myself about where I had come from and where I was now. But in September, I was reorganizing the apartment. I had started a new phase of making it what I wanted it to be. The phase where I was no longer covering the basics and was now choosing things for the specific pleasure of them. And I pulled the mop out of the closet and looked at it. It was a fine mop. Nothing wrong with it. It had done nothing to me. But I drove it to the Goodwill on a Saturday morning, along with some other things I was clearing out. And when I got home, I put a framed print in the corner where the closet door opened. It was a photograph I had bought from a local artist. a long exposure shot of city lights reflected in a wet street at night, all light and motion and blur. I hung it at the correct height and stood back and looked at it. My apartment looked back at me in the particular way a room looks at you when everything in it is where it should be. By the time the next Thanksgiving came around, I had 7 active clients, a waiting list that had grown to 5, and a reputation in a specific and growing pocket of the Indianapolis design world as someone who could be trusted with a vision and would return it to you better than you had imagined. I was 28 years old. I was not rich. I was not finished. But I was building something with my own hands in a way that felt entirely unlike the work I had done in a house where the labor was involuntary and the reward was only the silence of people who expected it. I had continued the careful, slow reformation of a relationship with my mother. Monthly coffee, the terms I had set, mostly honored. She had told my father about our meetings eventually. He had nothing to say about it that she relayed to me, which I interpreted as the best available outcome given the situation. Cole remained at arm's length, not hostile, not warm, somewhere in the middle distance where people go when they know they were wrong but aren't prepared to say so. Derek, to his credit, called me in October and said, "I've been thinking about it, Amelia, and I think things were unfair to you growing up. I don't have a better apology than that, but I wanted to say it." I thanked him. I meant it. We were not close, but the call meant something. I did not go home for Thanksgiving. I did not feel ready to return to that table, that house, that kitchen with the linoleum and the overhead light that turned everyone gray. Maybe someday. Maybe not. That was still an open question, and I was comfortable with open questions because I had learned that some things take the time they take, and the answers come when the ground is ready. What I did instead was this. I invited 4 people to my apartment for Thanksgiving dinner. My coworker from the co-working space, a web developer named James, who was funny and decent and had nowhere to be. My friend from my design program, Paloma, who drove up from Bloomington and brought a bottle of wine and a playlist. A neighbor from the 3rd floor, Rosario, who was 60 years old and had moved to Indianapolis from Monterey 15 years ago, and had mentioned once in the elevator that Thanksgiving was the holiday she had the hardest time with, being so far from her family. And my mother, who said yes before I had finished asking, in a voice that told me it was the thing she wanted most and had not expected to be offered. I cooked for 2 days. A turkey, brined overnight, roasted slowly on Thursday morning. My grandmother's green bean casserole, made from the recipe card written in my grandmother's handwriting that I had photocopied before I left home and kept in a folder in my kitchen drawer. Fresh rolls, a sweet potato dish with pecans, because I had always loved it, and because I no longer needed a reason beyond that. My apartment smelled of butter and fresh bread, and the particular sweetness of the sweet potato dish baking in the oven. The windows were fogged at the edges from the warmth. Rosario arrived first, with a tin of Mexican wedding cookies, and put on an apron without being asked. James brought a terrible board game that we played after dinner and argued about the rules. Paloma put on her playlist, and the apartment had music in it, which I had sometimes forgotten to allow. My mother sat at the table I'd refinished in slate and watched me set out the dishes. I had set 5 places. My own good dishes, plain white rim, bought last spring, mine. Nobody handed anyone a condition. Nobody was assigned to mop. I brought the turkey to the table. I looked at the 5 faces around it, James laughing at something Paloma had said, Rosario straightening her silverware with the care of someone who respects a table, my mother with her hands in her lap, watching me move around the room the way people watch when they understand they are seeing something they perhaps prevented for too long. I sat down. I did not sit last. I sat at my own table, in my own home, in the life I had built on the other side of a door I chose to walk through, and I sat first. I said, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this room and the people in it, and for every hard year that taught me exactly who I wanted to become. Rosario said, Amen. James said, Does that count as grace? Because I'm starving. Paloma said, It counts. Pass the rolls. My mother said nothing, but she reached across the corner of the table and put her hand briefly on mine. And I let her. And then I picked up the serving fork. I want to say something to you, if you have stayed with me this far. If you have ever been the one in the kitchen while everyone else sat down. If you have ever been handed a mop instead of a plate. If you have ever been told in some language, spoken or silent, that your belonging in a room was conditional on your usefulness in it. You are allowed to set it down, not to get revenge, not to teach anyone a lesson, not to wait until you've proven yourself enough that they finally agree you've earned the right to be fed without conditions, just because it is yours to set down, because a life that is fully yours starts the moment you do. If this story landed somewhere real for you, leave a comment below and tell me about it. I read them. Everyone. If you haven't liked this video yet, please do. It takes 1 second and it matters more than you know. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Tap the bell so you get them when they come, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. You might change their whole afternoon. I'll see you in the next one. I arrived Wednesday at 3 in the afternoon. My mother was not home from the dental office yet, so I used the spare key I still had and let myself in. The house smelled the same as always. That particular combination of the carpet cleaner she bought at the warehouse store and the gas burner that had a small leak they had never gotten fully repaired. The overhead light in the kitchen was on. There was a list on the counter. Not a hostile list. Not a list designed to communicate anything, I think, other than the ordinary logistics of a large meal. But it was a list of tasks. Go to the store for stock, iron the tablecloth, polish the silver, clean the guest bathroom, and it was on the counter in a position that made clear it was for whoever arrived first. Whoever arrived first was me. It was always me. I went to the store. I ironed the tablecloth. I polished the silver. I cleaned the guest bathroom. My mother came home at 5:15 and walked through the house and said, "Oh, you got started. Good." She said it with warmth. I want to be fair to her. She said it with genuine appreciation. It just didn't occur to her to wonder whether, after a 3.5-hour drive, anyone might need 20 minutes to sit down first. Derek arrived Thanksgiving morning with his wife, Laura, and their 2 kids. He brought a 12-pack of beer and set it in the refrigerator and stood in the kitchen for about 4 minutes talking to my mother, and then migrated to the living room with my father. Laura was pleasant. She sat with me in the kitchen for a while and tried to help, but she had one of the kids on her lap and eventually went back to the living room too. Cole arrived at 10:30 with a store-bought pecan pie in a plastic clamshell container. He set it on the counter. He said, "It's from Baker's. Supposed to be good." He found his spot on the couch. The pie sat in its container on the counter next to the 2 pies I had made from scratch the night before. I had been on my feet since 9. By 10, I had put the turkey in. By 11, I had made cornbread stuffing. By noon, I had the potatoes peeled and cubed sitting in cold water, the green beans trimmed, the rolls shaped and resting on the pan. I had moved around that kitchen like a woman doing a job, because I was a woman doing a job, and the house had organized itself perfectly around me, doing that job the same way it always had. At 12:15, my father came into the kitchen to refill his coffee. He looked around at the organized chaos of cooking, the dishes staged and waiting their turn in the oven, the good smell of everything coming along. He said, "Smells good in here." He said it to the room, to the air, not to any person in particular. I said, "Thanks." He said, "We eating it too?" I said, "Probably 1:30. I have to let the turkey rest." He nodded and went back to the living room. At 1 o'clock, the turkey was resting and the sides were holding, and I was washing the last of the prep dishes by hand at the sink. My mother came in and looked at the floor, the old linoleum, the pattern worn white at the high traffic points near the sink and the stove. She made a small sound. She said, "Amelia, I need you to mop before your aunt and uncle get here. They're coming at 2 and the floor looks..." I set down the dish I was washing. I turned around. I kept my voice level. I said, "Can Derek or Cole do it? I've been cooking since 9. I haven't eaten. I haven't sat down." My mother looked at me. There was a pause. It was not a guilty pause, and it was not a considering it pause. It was the pause of a woman who was used to a very particular kind of conversation and had just been handed a different kind. She walked to the closet under the stairs. She opened it. She pulled out the yellow mop. She held it out to me and said, without raising her voice, without anger, with the flat certainty of someone stating a household policy that has always been in effect: no work, no food. No work, no food. I took the mop. My hands closed around the handle. The pine cleaner smell hit me, sharp and cold and familiar. I stood there, and I thought about 9 years old, and the birthday party. I thought about the certificate that nobody came to see. I thought about 3 months that became 18. I thought about "who will help around here," said twice, in the same exact form 3 years apart, as though I was infrastructure, as though I was a system the house ran on, as though I could be replaced with a newer model, but had not been because I was still available and functioning. I thought about all of it in about 4 seconds, and then the thinking stopped, and something else took over. Not rage, not tears, something quieter than either of those. Something that had been building since I was 9 years old in the living room with the vacuum cord in my hands on my own birthday. I set the mop against the wall, gently, carefully, the way you set down something you are done carrying. There is a particular kind of clarity that comes when a decision is finally made after years of almost making it. I had been almost leaving that house for 20 years. I had been almost saying the thing I needed to say since I was a teenager, sketching rooms in a notebook in my bedroom. And in that moment in the kitchen, the almost went away. I walked to the coat closet. I pulled out my parka, the gray one I had driven up in the day before. I put it on. I picked up my purse from the kitchen table where I had set it when I arrived. I picked up my keys. My mother said, "Amelia, what are you?" I did not answer. I walked through the dining room. The table was set for 12 in the good dishes I had washed by hand. The centerpiece of dried corn and gourds was in the middle of the table. From the living room, I could hear the television, the push and squeal of a football crowd. My father said, "Amelia," from the living room. Not a question, a statement, flat and with a note of annoyance in it, the way you say a name when you are telling someone to knock it off. I went past the doorway without stopping. Derek looked up. His expression was the expression of someone who had not been following the events that led here and was therefore confused. Cole was on his phone and did not look up at all. I opened the back door. The cold hit me. That Indiana, late November cold, the specific cold of a gray day where the sky and the ground are the same color and the air smells like dried grass and exhaust and something a long way off burning. The cold draft I had felt all my childhood from this door, the one my mother had been meaning to reseal for as long as I could remember. I stepped outside. The door swung shut behind me. I walked across the backyard to where I had parked on the grass because Derek's truck was in the driveway and Cole had taken the other spot. I got in. The seat was cold. The engine started on the first try. I put it in reverse and I drove away. I drove for about 6 minutes before the shaking started. Not crying, not yet, just a physical response in my hands on the wheel. A fine trembling that I recognized as the release of something that had been held at constant tension for a very long time. I pulled over at a gas station on Route 36 and sat with the engine running. I put my hands flat on my thighs and pressed down. I looked straight ahead through the windshield at the gray sky and the gray road and a plastic bag moving across the parking lot in a cold wind. My phone was already going. I could see it lighting up on the passenger seat. I did not touch it. After a few minutes, the trembling stopped. I put the car back in drive. I got on the highway. I drove 3.5 hours back to Indianapolis. I got home at 8 at night. My apartment was half furnished. I had moved in 2 weeks before Thanksgiving and had not had time to make it what I wanted it to be yet. The living room had a couch, a lamp, a stack of boxes I hadn't unpacked. The kitchen had the essentials and not much else. The walls were white and bare. I sat down on the floor, not the couch, the floor, leaning against the couch, and I ate the gas station sandwich I had bought on the way through. It was a turkey club, which, given the day, struck me at some point as funny. My phone had stopped ringing by then, but the messages were building. From my mother. Amelia, please come back. You're being dramatic. Dinner is ready. From Derek. Mom's upset. Come on. From Cole. You seriously just left? On Thanksgiving? That's pretty messed up. From my mother again. Your father is very upset. I don't know what got into you. From an aunt I had not spoken to in 8 months. Honey, I heard there was some trouble. Your mama is heartbroken. I read every message. I set the phone face down on the floor next to me. I finished the sandwich. I unscrewed the cap from a water bottle and drank. Through the window, the city was doing what the city does at night. Lights in rectangles, the sound of traffic below, somewhere a siren, then silence, then a different kind of hum. I felt, sitting on that floor in that bare apartment, something I hadn't felt in years. I felt quiet, not happy exactly, not yet, not done with anything, but quiet. The particular quiet of a room that has stopped asking something of you. I slept on the floor that night with a blanket pulled from one of the unopened boxes. Not because I was in crisis. Because I didn't feel like moving. And I was somewhere, for the first time in a very long time, where I could decide not to move, and no one would hand me a reason why I should. The calls and texts continued for 2 weeks. My mother called 3 times the day after Thanksgiving, and twice the day after that. My father did not call himself, which told me something about how he had processed it. As a disciplinary withdrawal, a withholding, you'll call when you're ready to apologize. Cole sent a long text on the Sunday after Thanksgiving that went through several phases: injured, accusing, philosophical, and then back to accusing, and ended with, "I hope you know what this did to the family." I read it twice and did not respond. An aunt called midweek. She had been deputized, I suspected, to mediate. She was kind about it, genuinely, asking how I was doing before she got to the point. The point was that everyone was upset, and maybe I could reach out to my parents and clear the air. I told her I was doing fine. I thanked her for checking in. I said I wasn't ready to clear anything at the moment. There was a particular text from my mother about 10 days after Thanksgiving that I want to describe because it landed differently than the others. It said, "Your brothers never had to be asked twice about anything. I don't understand what happened to make you this way." I sat with that text for a long time. "My brothers never had to be asked twice," she said, meaning they complied. What happened to make me this way? Meaning the way I was a defect, a development that had gone wrong somewhere, a girl who had turned out less compliant than expected. I did not respond to that one either, but I wrote it down in my notebook because I was a person who kept notebooks, and I wrote underneath it. What happened to me is that I grew up. The mop came up in a different way several days later. I was unpacking a box of cleaning supplies I had brought from home before I moved. Basic things, a dustpan, a bottle of glass cleaner, a small broom. And at the bottom of the box, folded with its head facing in, was a compact mop I had apparently packed without thinking about it. I lifted it out and stood in my kitchen holding it. And then I laughed. I laughed at a genuine volume that I had not laughed at in some time. I stood in my own kitchen, in my own apartment, in my own city, holding a mop. And I laughed until my eyes hurt. Then I put it in the closet under my sink. My mop in my kitchen, my choice whether it moved. There is something I have thought about a great deal in the time since that Thanksgiving, and I want to try to say it clearly, because I think it matters. I did not walk out of that house because I was done loving my family. I walked out because I had finally understood the difference between love and the performance of love, between belonging and the labor required to maintain a version of belonging that cost only me. Those are not the same thing, and for years I had allowed them to be treated as the same thing, which is how the transaction worked. I gave the labor, I received the belonging, and I called it love, because what else do you call what you feel for the people who are home to you? You don't have a word for the thing that is love mixed with servitude, mixed with the fear of what happens if you refuse. You just call it family, and you keep going. I kept going for 27 years. And then, one November afternoon, I stopped. I want to be careful here about something. I am not telling you that the right answer is always to walk away. I am not telling you that every difficult family situation calls for a dramatic exit. Human relationships are more complicated than that, and the answers almost never arrive in clean, dramatic moments, even when that's how we remember them later. What I am telling you is that what was asked of me that Thanksgiving was not just the mopping of a floor. It was the 42nd time a version of that request had been made without any corresponding expectation placed on anyone else in the house, and the request carried in it all 41 that came before it. And the weight of carrying all of that forward was no longer something I was willing to do simply because it was familiar to me. I had made the mistake, for years, of confusing what was familiar with what was acceptable. Those are different things, too. Familiar means you have been doing it for a long time. Acceptable means you have consented to do it, freely, without coercion, and would choose it again if offered the choice plainly. I had never been offered the choice plainly. That Thanksgiving, I was offered it plainly. Work or go without, and I chose to go. And what I found on the other side of going was not the punishment they expected, and perhaps I feared. What I found was my own life, waiting for me in an empty apartment with white walls and no furniture and the whole quiet possibility of everything I had not yet become. I think about the woman I was in that kitchen sometimes, holding the mop, 27 years old and already so tired. And I think she did the right thing. Not the easy thing. Not the dramatic thing, because she walked out quietly. No scene, no speech, just the back door closing and the car reversing off the frosted grass. The right thing. And what the right thing got her was everything I have now. The design business, the clients who trust me with their spaces, the apartment that looks exactly like the person I wanted to be when I was 14, rearranging my bedroom furniture on a Saturday afternoon. The dinner table I set with my own dishes for the people I chose. The life I cooked and served and sat down to eat first. without anyone handing me a condition for it. Not every story of someone who walks out ends this way, and I know that. Some endings are harder and messier, and the process of healing takes longer than mine did, and the family stuff never fully resolves. I got lucky in some ways. I had a career that could hold me. I had the capacity to build quickly once I was free. I had a mother who found the courage eventually to say the thing she should have said earlier. Not everyone gets that, and if you are in a version of this story where the family part did not resolve and may not resolve, that is real, and that pain is real, and it does not mean you made the wrong choice by leaving. Sometimes the choice to leave is the right choice, even when the ending is not tidy, because the alternative was to stay in something that was consuming you, and there is no version of staying that produces a better outcome. I stayed for 27 years. I built my business in 9 months. The numbers will tell you something about where the investment was returning. I am still building. The hotel renovation is ongoing. It is the most beautiful project of my professional life so far. 12 rooms in an old brick building near the Cultural Trail. Each room a specific conversation about light and material, and the kind of rest that feels like intention rather than default. I go to site on Tuesdays and Thursdays and stand in unfinished rooms and see what they will be, the way I could always see what rooms were trying to become. I think that is the skill, actually. Not just design, the ability to see, in a thing that is incomplete and unfinished and still in the rough, what it is becoming. To trust that vision enough to do the work even when the current reality doesn't match it yet. I had to learn to apply that to myself, to see Amelia at 27 holding a mop in a kitchen in Indiana and say, this is not who she is. This is where she is right now. Give her the door and she will build the room. She did. She did build the room. And it smells of butter and fresh bread on Thanksgiving, and the table is set with plain white dishes, and nobody at it is working for their supper. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is, I think, everything.